Darth Maul is one of the most iconic Star Wars characters of all time, having been central to marketing for The Phantom Menace and having stolen the show in the movie itself. But as anyone who's watched that start to the best trilogy of movies in human history knows, he wasn't all that central to the movie, and in terms of plot, he only really served as a distraction. His minimal role in the plot seems unbecoming of a Sith Lord, which makes sense, because he wasn't one. No, the title of this video wasn't clickbait. Darth Maul was indeed not a true Sith.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
To start, let's take a look at what the Sith Lords truly were. The Sith, as seen in the movies, were the latest in a long and torturous series of orders to have had a claim to the title of Dark Lord of the Sith, which descended to them directly from Ajunta Pal and the ancient conquerors of the Sith species. This incarnation of the Sith was known as the Order of the Sith Lords, which was founded by Darth Bane after the previous incarnation of Sith, the Brotherhood of Darkness, which perished in the 7th Battle of Ruusan. Bane's order took the philosophy of earlier Sith Lords, most notably Darth Revan, and essentially concentrated them into extreme versions. Darth Bane became a Sith at a time where the title of Sith Lord was shared by hundreds of beings, each leaders of their own mini-orders that were gathered under the Brotherhood of Darkness. Bane witnessed infighting, posturing, waste, and what he perceived as impotent leadership all around him, and it shaped his view of what the Sith should be greatly. Darth Bane believed that the power of the dark side of the Force was like venom. Spreading it only diluted it and made all that practiced it weaker. For this reason, he created the infamous rule of two, which limited the number of Sith Lords to only two, a master and an apprentice. One that would embody the power of the dark side and one that would crave it. It was a system in which only the strongest would rule, a system that meant, in theory, each Dark Lord of the Sith was more powerful than the last. He took on Darth Zana as his apprentice to carry on the cycle. She eventually killed him and took Darth Cognis as her own apprentice, beginning a line of Dark Lords that eventually terminated in Darth Sidious. But there was more to being a Sith Lord than following the rule of two and practicing the dark side. As we've discussed before, the dark side itself isn't necessarily evil. To practice the dark side is to use one's emotions to bend the Force to one's own will, as opposed to bending oneself to the will of the Force as Lightsiders did. This can be used for good, as in the case of Revan and Malak during the Mandalorian Wars, though more often than not, it ends badly by the very nature of going against the will of the Force. The dark side does become purely evil, however, when used as the Sith use it. Emotion, as various Jedi have said far too many times, is the path to the dark side. It's what gives Darksiders power and provides them with motivation. Usually, this motivation was grounded in an emotional attachment to someone or something, a lifeline that connected a being to the universe. Sith believed in severing this lifeline, in traveling down the dark oath and then, quite literally, killing what keeps you emotionally grounded. To be a Sith is more than to be a Darksider. While some Darksiders have a variety of intentions and sources of motivation, Sith only have one: the pursuit of pure, personal power at any and all costs. The Sith ritualized this severance from the universe so as to preserve this. To become a Sith Lord, one needed to murder the person that kept them emotionally grounded. There are many examples of this, such as when Darth Bane murdered Kay Sim, his mentor, when Darth Zana murdered her closest childhood friend, and when Darth Sidious murdered his entire family with his bare hands. The results was that Sith were cut off from the universe, bereft of any motivation save personal gain, submerged completely in the darkness. Alternatively, as Darth Bane probably would have put it, they were freed from emotional chains. This, by the way, is why Sith had access to abilities some would consider to be unnatural. Those abilities, which ranged from Force Lightning to alchemy that allowed for the mutation of creatures into monstrous Sith spawn, were indeed unnatural, which is why only Sith could use them. Because they had severed their connection to life, they were emotionally capable of perverting it, which is the common trait that all unique Sith abilities share. The final distinction of Bane's Order of the Sith Lords was the role that they played. Previous Sith Orders had classes, so to speak. The Brothers of Darkness, for example, trained Sith Marauders and Sith Assassins, while the Sith Empire of Old trained Inquisitors, Warriors, and others. In all such orders, the title of Sith Lord was actually a class of its own, namely the ruling class, composed of beings who fit the mold of Darth Sidious, devoting themselves not to battle, but rather to the expansion of their own power. All of Bane's Sith were Sith Lord. They focused not on using the Force for blind battle rage or assassination, but for manipulation and other more complicated and more sinister things. While apprentices were expected to play the role of assassins when needed, this was never their primary purpose. For all Sith, their purpose was expanding their own power through manipulation, domination, and the study of arcane Sith techniques, slowly working in the shadows to acquire ultimate power. Now that we understand what a true Sith is, let us now go into how Darth Maul fits none of the above categories. Let's start with the rule of two. As those of you who've read the truly superb novel Darth Plagueis know, Darth Sidious actually trained Maul while he was still a Sith apprentice. Darth Plagueis was alive for most of the duration of the Phantom Menace, though he never made an appearance. Sidious actually killed him during a private celebration of his ascension to Supreme Chancellery, when Plagueis fell asleep for the first time in decades as a result of having too much wine, which Sidious saw as a sign that Plagueis was weak and that his time had come. This was around the same time Maul got cut in half, which we know because Sidious at first mistook the ripple that event created in the Force as the result of Plagueis' spirit attempting to attack him. And it wasn't like Maul was a secret apprentice that Sidious was planning to train after Plagueis' death either. He told his master of Maul's existence before he began to even train him, and Plagueis approved of his training despite the rule of two. This was because Maul wasn't being trained as a Sith Lord, he was being trained as a Sith assassin. Sidious kept Plagueis up to date on Maul's training, concealing nothing because there was nothing to conceal. Even his plans for after Plagueis' death, Sidious had no real use for Maul as a true apprentice, as he needed a totally different kind of person for that role to lead the CIS, namely someone like Count Dooku. That alone disqualifies Maul from being a true Sith. But let's be thorough here and go deeper. As we just said, Maul was trained as a Sith assassin, not a Sith Lord. His job consisted purely of hunting people and doing errands for the actual Sith Lords, which was only a part of the role of a true Sith apprentice. Maul was trained only for combat, and he neither wanted nor was given anything more during his time as Sidious's apprentice. Strength in combat was his focus, but it was not the focus of a Sith Lord. As we said before, Sith Lords focused more on complicated and varied types of power, more efficient methods of personal gain. To continue down the list, Maul never completed the Sith ritual of killing one's emotional grounding either. This was because he didn't have any, or at least any at the time. As Darth Sidious saw it, Maul's emotions were more akin to bestial instinct than what most beings experienced. He never fully understood the dark side, even though he practiced it. Maul's genuine concern for Savage Opress during the Clone Wars simply proves that this was a lesson that he never learned. Lastly, and what Darth Bane would have considered the greatest disqualifying factor, Maul wasn't out for his own personal gain. His service to Sidious was exactly that. Service to Sidious. His motivations were purely his master's motivations, with no ambition or plans of his own, so to speak of. He sought power, but for a Sith, he didn't seek it enough. He sought it within the realm of Sidious's plan, which would only ever have brought him to being the second in command of the most powerful, something no true Sith would have ever settled for. That did ultimately change after Maul's bisection, but during his time in service to Sidious, he was purely a tool. He single-mindedly did what Sidious ordered him to and no more, similarly to how Ventress operated during her time in Dooku's Dark Acolytes. He never plotted against his master, as Dooku and Vader both did, and he rarely ever questioned Sidious's orders. This is not how any Sith Lord operated, never mind one as part of Bane's order. With all that said, the conclusion is pretty clear. Darth Maul was never a true Lord of the Sith. He may have used the title of Darth, but we do not grant him the rank of Sith Lord. In the scheme of the Sith Grand Plan, Maul was on the level not of Dooku but rather of General Grievous, or below it rather, as at least Grievous knew the true Sith Master, while Maul was never told about Plagueis, and he only vaguely suspected that his master served another. So that's why Darth Maul is undeserving of being called a Sith Lord. But as per usual guys, I want to know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you agree or disagree with our assessment? And just before you go guys, you know the drill, make sure you check out all the links in the description below. We have our Discords where you can interact with other Star Wars fans, our Geetsly's gaming network where you can actually play Star Wars games with other Star Wars fans as well. And I have a second history channel for any other history buffs like me, where I talk about the unknowns of World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War. So those are all in the description below. Make sure you check them out guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.